Welcome back to another exciting episode of Riding Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael, and joining me tonight is a guest who was recently on, and we are actually going to continue her story and her experiences. So, just a reminder that every guest on this show shares their experiences and it's their truth. So, I ask just everyone in the chat group and everyone that watches to please keep that in mind and to support one another. And with that being said, I am going to turn it over to my guest to continue her story. And so I give you the one, the only amazing, super informative Olivia James.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me back on.
Thank you for coming back on.
I guess we talked a little bit before we started the show that I could just continue. We had a couple of topics where I left off, so I'm kind of going to start there. Um, Last time we chatted with everyone, I kind of gave like a backstory of how I kind of became involved in the programs, MK Ultra, Monarch program, the Secret Space program, things like that. So I kind of wanted to continue that and just give a few more details. Um, So I kind of wanted to talk because it's always been like an eye opener for me is to talk about Mars. And I always say that we think that, I mean, I myself too, before I remembered who I was, I didn't know that, Mars was inhabited or was full of people. I had no idea until I got my memories back. And that was some of the first memories I ever received was of me on Mars. And I know a lot of people in the secret space program, they have kind of a bit of a different experiences of being on a different planet than I do. I mean, because I know we all have watched a lot of movies and sci-fi and we think that it's all about, big huge wars against aliens and things, but that actually wasn't really my experience because I got a job in the corporate sector on Mars. So I was part of their, almost like a what I call human resources. I did a lot of human resources work for them. And I wanted to talk about a little bit about how I got that job actually. So when I was a little bit younger, probably like in my 20s in my life, they wanted me to do some what I describe I the term I have discovered is called beta tracking, and beta programming is type of programming that they use on some of their assets where think about like something called Black Widow. Like, so my job would have been I would be giving a mark. So that's what we called it, a mark. So there would be a person, and then I would have to be tasked with infiltrating that person's life and completing whatever outcome I was directed to. And in the programs, we called them outcomes. We didn't, that's the name we gave for everything. All the directions you were given lead to a specific outcome, and that's what you call it. You never say what it actually is. You just say the outcome. So whatever outcome they had directed me to complete, then I would have to do that based on who the mark was and what kind of information they were trying to get. And a lot of it was intel gathering. A lot of it was recording with an altar that had a photographic memory, things like that to get the information. There were so many, you know, and actually, they had no idea, and they wouldn't know because that's we're trained to make sure they don't know who we actually are. So you would sometimes just meet a person just like normal, or so they thought. You always knew where they were going to be. You're giving the targeted coordinates, things like that. You go meet this person; they're going to be there, and it never failed. I never had a mission for beta tracking fail. It always something they always were able to, see me somehow. No matter who was in the room, they always were drawn to me. Whether that's a psychic ability or not, I'm not quite sure how I did that, but we were trained to do that kind of thing and complete those outcomes. So I ended up getting a promotion for a job well done, they said, pretty much not saying a perfect score, but close to perfect score in terms of the outcomes that I delivered to, the overarching agencies and program handlers. So they considered that a successful asset in that area. So my promotion led me to be used in the corporate on Mars. And so what I did was I was on the McCreary base on Mars, and McCreary base is located near a landing dock. It's in the South Canal region. So and I even know my specific service number. It's 6349 Division Mariner. That's the division I was under in the corporate sector. And I was under the Ground Force Battalion of Mars Defense Force. So what I did was my job was to bring the new recruits that were coming in, I would bring them into my office. And sometimes I would take my time, sometimes I moved a little quicker. When I remember when I first got to Mars, I was probably pretty fresh in terms of, using my personality profiling ability to determine what might be a good job for them. So anybody that came in my office, I would do like my assessments using my various abilities, mild telepathy, personality profiling, and I basically call it like reading somebody, reading energy. And so what you do is you sit the person down and you try to make the we had to have the office be very comfortable, and they had me dress a certain way that wasn't it wasn't like everybody else. I had a different look. I looked more like a business professional rather than in some type of smart suit or something like that. They wanted the people to feel comfort and some type of subconscious tie to their old life, in terms of seeing me dressed that way, so they wouldn't be afraid. Because when people are more comfortable, you can get more information from them. Just like when I was doing beta tracking, the more comfortable people felt, the more they felt like they had control over you, the more comfortable they would be in speaking about certain things, and opening up and being more vulnerable and giving you their secrets. That's just how it goes. So I would meet with them for about an hour and do my assessments and, find out, what kind of things they like to do. And it's mainly just getting them talking, and all the body language, everything about their body language, everything about their energy, the things they're saying, you read between the lines in order to determine, what kind of person they are. I have to know who they are and would they be good in a particular job. Once in a while, not it was very rare because I didn't work with super soldiers. I just worked with, the basic, ground force recruits coming in. And when I was on Mars, a lot of the recruits, they were starting to be, when I first started to get there, they were starting to be more voluntary. So back when I was really young, maybe like in the 80s and early 90s, they were still using MK Ultra and they were just taking people, so pretty much it was military abduction. But more later, later in the later 90s and early 2000s, a lot of those people were voluntary recruits. They're coming straight from the military and telling people they're going overseas and actually they're going to Mars. And when those people came in the office, they're excited. They watched all the movies, the sci-fi movies. They think they're going to be in some big, war with aliens and fighting, giant spiders and things like that. And that wasn't the case. I would usually give them a job. We had a lot of different divisions that I could push them in. Some people went to our mining division, um, resources, water treatment, waste treatment. We even had an entertainment division. So there was a lot of different places that we can put them. We needed instructors, different like personnel just to run the base. Anybody that you could think to keep this giant base running, we needed somebody for all of that. So I'm not sure how disappointed they became when they found out that they would be working like, I don't know, just cleaning or putting things away, maybe some plumbing work, thing like that. They probably didn't even realize that. But I couldn't just put somebody in, the actual, ground military if they hadn't had that experience. This was something really, detailed that they had to be ready for. Once in a while, I would get somebody that came through the office that had what I could consider maybe like a special ability, even if it was mild. And then I would have to refer them out to special sector. That's what we called it, special sector. We didn't say exactly where or when or how. We just called it special sector. And that's where I came from. In my file, there's a note in the file that says I came from special sector. So that means there's some type of like, I don't know how to say it, like privileges that go along with special sector. You kind of get up for that's how I kind of got my job, is being from special sector. You
Yeah,
know,
like an
Uh,
autonomy.
yeah, they give you a little bit of like special privileges, and you kind of get like some of those higher level jobs where you're not just on the ground fighting and things like that. I didn't have to do anything like that. I was more like right under the general. He was kind of like my boss. So I would do that. I did that work for a really long time, several years. I was working. I think the last 10 years of my 20-year of service with them I did on the Mars base. And you know what? I hated it. I hated everything about it. I didn't have a lot of connections because they didn't want me to have connections with people. They thought that it would pull pull my ability from me, and I wouldn't be able to do the same things that I normally do. So they didn't and nobody trusted me, because I was, pretty much working for the man, kind of like, who would want to be associating with somebody, right under the general. And part of my job, in which they tasked me with, is anybody that came in my office, I had to, if I felt like they were gonna be rebellious, and I specifically called it challenging the status quo. If that were a possibility, I would have to alert you know, the upper management and make sure there was a note saying this person could possibly be one of those rebellious, because that was not allowed on my base. There was no, rebellion. There was no talking back. You had to do everything step by step with the way they said it. And we were trained like that, to consider everything they said, we had to do perfect. You listen to everything they said. That we didn't have it, almost like you didn't have your own mind thinking. You had to do everything they wanted to do based on the morals and the values of that particular base, and which our base was very much power, control, and conquest was the name of the game for our base. And what we were trying to achieve is conquest, space conquest, earth conquest, everywhere. So I did that for quite a while. um, and like I said, I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't talk to a lot of people. I pretty much stayed to myself. Nobody wanted to talk to somebody like me. And I thought that was what I thought was really weird is that when I was working in human resources, that sociopaths and psychopaths are highly sought after for military abduction, because they think, and actually those people get high level jobs as officers and generals and things like that, because they think those types of people can make the hard decisions in war. They won't have that empathy. They won't have that suffering if they make a bad decision or a hard decision, in terms of who to save or who to attack. They won't even have that empathy. So those people are sought after, highly sought after, for higher positions in power. And
Kind
it's
of
weird.
makes sense.
Yeah, and it's weird because there's some of us, men and women, we're living and working amongst psychopaths. Like, I literally would work with sociopaths and psychopaths, and you're never safe, especially. And just saying that, the base was very patriarchal in general. So even though I could protect myself, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to protect yourself, really. So, and that kind of makes it very unsafe environment, in my opinion. There was sometimes, a couple of them tried to rough me up or whatever, and I just I just tried to stop them. I couldn't really. You're not really supposed to fight back or hurt them, because then you could be blamed for that. So you just kind of have to make sure they don't attack you. I'd stay to yourself, stay away from them, kind of people. So they just try to rough me up a few times. And I guess I became, because I found Mars to be a very lonely place. So I almost want to say that I became kind of depressed from it. But I didn't know what depression was, because we didn't have that word on Mars. You're not allowed to be depressed. You're only allowed to, follow their rules and be what they want you to be, especially with, this heavy mind control programming running, and me being an alter. So the alter's name, when I was on Mars, my name was Rachel Meadows. And we always had these goofy alter names. But she just was, kind of like a sad type of girl, and didn't really live for anything except for completing this job. And that was it. You just go back to your room. I didn't have a lot of friends or anything. And there was one time that so the entertainment division, they do these exhibitions on the weekends sometimes, And it's a way to draw people, from outside, the civilians from outside the base to come in. Sometimes they come in, and if it's a special event or whatever, and they have these exhibitions, it's almost like gladiator games. They do it for fun, like UFC type stuff and things like that. They think that's, everybody loves that stuff, even on Mars. So there was one time that they were offering for people to volunteer to do fighting, or do like an exhibition, just so, and then you could get a prize. So I felt like everybody hated me, and I felt like if I volunteered for this, that maybe, I might get a little bit of different, people might have a different idea about me or who they thought I was. So I volunteered a couple times, and um one of the times I volunteered, it was to be for sword fighting, me and another girl, and they wanted you to look very girly and dress up and things like that. And you got to choose what your reward was for doing this, for volunteering. And I chose food. And the other girl, she chose jewelry and things like that. But it was really weird because that stuff has no value on Mars. Like, shiny stuff, it means nothing. That's why I was like, I want food. I don't know. I somehow asked for like steak and baked potatoes and things like that. So we did that, the sword fighting thing. And I do remember, I did it probably like 5 times, the exhibition, probably like 5 different times. And I know I lost like 3 of the times. And all I remember is being back in my room after it was over. Like, I don't know how I survived, because, it's to the death. So if you get your throat slit, and I know I got my throat slit once, and I don't know how I lived through that. You just wake up the next day in your room and you're alive, and, you have your food waiting for you that you ordered or whatever. You got your prize. So I did that a couple times because I thought, that would help, people look at me in a different way, not so much as, the corporate, the corporate sector or whatever.
I wonder if they put you through a med bed to heal that up so you could keep doing what you're supposed to do.
I'm not quite sure. They it would seem like very easy and simple to them. They had no worries about it. So I'm sure they had something that just pretty much patched us up, and you look normal the next day. You look totally normal.
Hmm.
Um,
There's a question in the chat room if you want to take a moment. They're asking, have you ever met or run into anyone on Earth whom you profiled on Mars?
Not basically profiled, but I did meet somebody that I had a relationship with on Mars. I met them here on Earth, and it was really weird. Um, so on Mars, I'll lead into that story. So I something happened to me. And it corresponded kind of to like what happened to me on Earth. Something happened to me while I was doing my job as the personality profiler, being in the office and everything, and it started to break down. I had a memory breakthrough. Things were changing inside me, and I was starting to, I think, have memories of my real life, like my original life. And it was really messing me up. I was starting to feel like a lot of anxiety, a lot of panic in my job, and that's not a job where you can have anxiety and panic. So they were not happy with my behavior, and I was just starting, I couldn't do the same work that I had been doing. I was so good at that, fade away because of these breakthrough memories and experiences coming through. I was getting very careless. I even tried to sneak into my boss's, the general's office, and I was looking through, I didn't even know what I was looking for. I was just looking through his things, like after he had left. And that is definitely not something you should be doing. And I just didn't know why. I just knew, I felt like I needed to find something, about something was wrong. I knew something was wrong, and I just didn't know what it was. I had no clue. But it was like a breakthrough, like my programming was breaking down. And so I ended up getting demoted. And they demoted me because I wasn't doing the same level of job that I was doing before. And I ended up having to be like a liaison for some of the incoming ships, and they were like cargo ships and things like that. And I would just sign off on the paperwork. I even worked for a short time on a medical satellite station, and that's near Mars. But on that satellite station, they're doing a lot of augments there, and augmented of bodies for soldiers and things like that. And some of the physicians or experimenters or researchers, whatever they are, some of them aren't fully human. So they feel the group feels like that if they have somebody like me that can almost act like a medical social worker, you go in their office and get them to sign for these procedures, then they think that it would go smoother. And they're very serious about having consents for everything. There's signatures everywhere for everything you do. So I would have to go and get the signature from people to so they're consenting to these procedures, from them replacing it with different things. And, I was just somebody that would keep them calm. Because imagine if somebody that wasn't fully human came in there and said, give me your signature, they might freak out or whatever. So they don't want that. So they have me go first. So I thought this was real. I ended up when I was working with the cargo ships, I met somebody who was just like a low level type worker. I don't know. I don't want to say low level, but he was more like a ground force worker, and he was, carrying cargo off the ships or whatever. And we ended up getting, entangled for a little bit. But I always remembered that one time he came back from a trip and he had something from Earth, and it was a treat. And I thought it was like the biggest gift in the world. He brought me back one of those raspberry zingers. It's like a little Debbie snack cake. He had smuggled that to me, and I thought it was like better than a diamond ring. It was like a little raspberry zinger. So it was like a little Debbie snack cake that he had stolen and brought back for me. Like the biggest gift ever. So that was somebody that I had met on Mars, and then I actually met him here on Earth, through the community and things like that. We met and kind of remembered the situation with the raspberry zinger. It was really interesting to have somebody remember, you know, that, because it was such a weird thing to remember. I don't remember like doing other stuff, but I remember like a snack cake. So, and food was something like that was always in my mind. I thought that was weird. For some reason, weird memories in me. I don't know if it's I don't know what the tie-in was, but sometimes food would trigger memories, maybe food smells or something like that. So I think that's interesting. Um, so when I started doing that, and I was getting close to retirement. At that point, my last 10 years of was getting close to retirement, and I knew what the retirement entailed. And for me, from what I remembered, at the end of the 20 years of service, they would age regress us and return us back to where they took us, which for me was at about age 19 when I officially got taken into that secret space program. But for years since childhood, I'd been used in like MK Ultra and Monarch programming. So they took me only for this 20 years at age 19. So I was pretty much there from 19 to 39. And I knew it was going to be, from what I remember, it was all chemicals. I'm sure at different points of time, they were doing different things because they're constantly progressing. They're constantly creating new technologies, things like that to go along with some of their processes and procedures. So I remember signing all the paperwork, and I seen it. And everybody who went through this program, if you were under Myers Defense Force, I can't speak for some of the other factions, you signed lots of paperwork. You agreed to be controlled and monitored for the rest of your life. And you also agree even to be used in your next life, which I think is really interesting, that they not only take control of this life, but you literally say, okay, if I'm born again, then you get to take me again by my own signature, my own consent. So they take that really serious. I also consented to be coded for re-entry. I remembered that right on the form. I was coded for re-entry. Um, and that means that once I was returned and went through they returned me to my crappy life. Once I was returned, they could come take me whenever they wanted. If they needed somebody for a job or a mission, they could come take me whenever they wanted, no questions asked, because that's what I signed for. And that's what, a lot of us signed for. We just don't remember. I remember though, because I was the one making people sign some of that stuff. So, um, I ended up getting returned to my normal life. And, you know, I went through that, and I tried to, um, and it was rough. I think it was rough. And I feel like they contribute to making it rough. Having you know, a weird, strange feeling all the time inside you, then I also had a lot of paranormal things that were kind of always surrounding me, a paranormal life kind of thing, which I find really strange, that they would kind of push that on me. But after I had been returned, like I said, I had gone through my whole crappy life, and a lot of things happened. It's living two lives. I lived two lives, so um, that's how I got through Mars, kind of though.
Yeah, it's definitely a mind warp, and I wonder,
Mm.
like you're saying, they make it crappy so that you're like, oh, I want to go back. It was so much better over there. Let's go
Some people,
back.
I've met people that can't wait to go back, and I find it just because I had a different experience. I didn't have that, like I was all powerful fighting in this big huge battle. I didn't have that. So I don't have that, that idea of valor, or military valor, things like that. I didn't have that. Even though I was in the military and I could do things, it's just that's not what my mind was trained for, what I was trained for. It was something different, so
No, and I commend you because as all of this is unfolding and being disclosed, everybody wants to focus on who had the psionics, who was fighting where, what ship were they on, who did they interact with, with star beings or
yeah,
other races. But nobody stops to think about
the practical things that happened.
who
Yeah.
was running the show behind the scenes,
Yeah.
and
Which is very
that's
important. Yeah.
yeah, and I commend you coming forward and saying, yeah, I wasn't, and I remember on the last episode being like, you're not just an author, and I'll reiterate it this time and saying, being an office worker does not make you less than somebody who is
Mhm.
using psionics on the front lines. We
Mhm.
all had a role to play, and so
And that was just one thing I did. I mean, obviously, I'm a government trained psychic, so I can do a lot of things, but that was that personality profiling that they trained me at age 13 for on the moon to use me for in the future. They it's like they already had it mapped out for me. They map your life out for you and what they're going to
oh
need you
yeah.
for. They make sure they train you in all these different. Did I talk last time about being used for paranormal things and the some of the occult projects? Did we talk about that last time?
I don't think we really got into the occult on the last episode.
Oh,
I
okay.
think you were just doing your basic starting, and then we were like, "Oh, the hour's up. Oh, well, we didn't even get to talk about this, this, and this." And
Because that's so. I mean, I find some of the occult things like just amazing because I feel like it's crazy that shit so far into the paranormal realm that people cannot. They make it unbelievable, but it's actually kind of like pretty practical what they're trying to do. That's why I think it's so interesting. So they had when I was under like monarch control, they had monarch has a catalog, and there's some of these what we would an elite families, just elite people that they have a specific idea of how they want to stay in control. So there was this particular family, and they were out like on the East Coast, and I got treated pretty well by them. But they had since 1500s they had connected with what we call like a familiar spirit or a familiar daemon. They use the word daemon, they don't say demon, they say daemon. And they feel like that connection is what brings them their success every year and keeps them in power, keeps them financially successful. In their minds, they think that is how they stay in power. So what they want to do, they kind of do this like ritualized things yearly, and it's quite expensive. So they don't do it all the time. They do it a couple times a year at the most. It's very expensive for them. And I think it's weird that it's so pricey because it was kind of easy for me. And so they use some, and what is what considered like so and actually demons taught me that word. from the dark side, they told me that what I do is called hosting. So that's how I got the word hosting. I called myself a host, and that's what my ability is, hosting. And they taught me. So in this particular time, I was taken to this a really nice, big, beautiful mansion, and they treated me very well, fed me well. I got to, have my own room and relaxing. And towards the evening, all the people came. They had like a lot of family members and friends came over, and they were just dressed like for a normal day. I didn't find them to be really weird or anything. And sometimes they would have me by myself, or I would have another person there that did the same thing I did. And I'm not the only person that can do hosting. If anybody does research, you can see that this has been done throughout cultures for thousands of years. They actually call it letting the spirit ride you. So I'm not the first person to attempt this or be able to have this ability. A lot of people can, and they sometimes people use it as part of their spiritual beliefs or spiritual process. So at this particular time, the family, they wanted me and another gentleman to do the hosting for them. So towards the evening, and then this was their ritual, and they didn't dress any differently. They didn't have black robes on or anything. They wore casual clothing. We sometimes they wanted us to take off our clothing, sometimes not. It just depended on, what they planned on doing. And they wanted us to host, which means they wanted us to bring down their daemon to this world. So that's what we would do. I would open myself up. I would go in a trance and open myself up to whatever was out there, and I would allow that thing to take over my body. And this particular family was a cult, and they're a cult of Bacchus. So I let Bacchus take over my body. And when I tried to stand up, it felt like I had like 200 pounds on each leg, because he's not used to being in a human form. He's not used to doing that. So it felt so heavy, and I was like almost like trudging, trying to get to where they wanted me to sit down. And what they wanted was they wanted to have dinner with their god. So they had me sit at the table, and they had all this big, huge, spread of food prepared. And, you know, Bacchus has taken over. And when Bacchus takes over, I take a back seat, and I just go to like a really kind of like relaxed, comfortable spot, and I let him take over. So he came to the table, and they were all so excited, and they were all standing around watching him. And, using my body, he just went nuts and started like ripping and tearing and eating the food like like an animal, because, obviously he's not a human. He doesn't know how to eat like with a knife. He was eating like an animal, just ripping the food. And they were, and I don't think Bacchus, from what I could tell, he did not like the reception he got for that. And he was really pissed off by that. They were like, you know, they were all standing around with their mouths open, like they couldn't believe, he came down, and he was mad. He was like, "How dare you, disrespect him in that manner?" Because he's saying like, "I'm a god. I came down here, and you kind of give me these eyes, like, you know." It's almost like they looked at him like they were disgusted. And he was not happy with their behavior. And also they were like asking him goofy questions, treating him like a regular psychic, like out in, just at a psychic fair or something. And they were asking him silly questions about, their husbands, their wives, their businesses, and things. And he was like, "You called a god down here for this? Like, how dare you? And you're not worthy to be my followers. You haven't done this." And he was really upset about that. But this is what some of these families are doing, because they think they stay in power this way. But Bacchus told me, he said that the the only reason they're rich and successful is because they were born rich and successful, and they carry it down their family line. He said he has nothing to do with it. He does nothing for them. He really doesn't even have a connection with this people. He said he comes here for the reverence and for the worship, because that's how a lot of the elder gods live, off that reverence and that worship. That's how they've lived for thousands of years. They consider themselves elder gods. And actually Bacchus used to be called Dionysus. So he was like one of the elder gods from different mythologies and things like that. And him, when and he's very connected to me. He feels, in his mind, he feels like I'm one of his progeny, because he said that I was conceived when my father was hosting him. So he considers me like a progeny of his. So he won't let anyone kind of harm me in a way. If I do end up having to do work, like go under trance, or I'm out working in the shadows, in the outer realms, some things like that. If I get nervous, and I call in my mind to him, it sounds like 1,000 thundering buffalo, like, coming towards me, like, as fast as it can be, and he comes so quickly, like, you know, he wouldn't let anybody even come around me in that realm. That's where he stays in his power. He has his power there. And a lot of the elder gods, when I meet with them or speak with them, they don't really come into physical form very often because it's difficult, and they don't like the response they get when they come in their true form, because these are god, they consider themselves gods. So when they come here and your mouth drops from disgust, by the way you look, that doesn't make them happy. So they rarely come in a physical form. They'd rather take over somebody else's body that allows them to do that. And so a lot of these families, some of the things that I know they're trying to do is they're trying to create their own little army. So when they're doing this hosting, sometimes, I'm not all the time, but they're trying to create with this hosting through whoever has that um daemon in their body. Some other people may have sexual relations with that daemon because they think that they can be physically intimate with their god, and that they can also produce children from those experiences. And in their minds, they think that they're building like an army of antichrists by doing that kind of thing. They think that they're able to do that because of that hosting, that the person isn't in there. It's something else inside. And then if you're physically intimate with that, they feel like whatever is birthed from that can be considered like demonic bloodline or something like that. I just thought that was interesting that they're trying to do that. Um so
It
that
is
was,
interesting because the bloodline is a huge thing for them.
yeah. And so they're continuing it. And like I said, some of these people have been doing this since like the 1500s, some farther back. Like there's one family, and these people were pretty interesting. And they're not very happy with me. They're very angry. So I do a lot of hosting work myself, just for my own personal information. I get information. I do a lot of remote viewing. I do a lot of astral traveling, bilocating, in order to get information for disclosure. So I do a lot of that. And I know at some point I had been trained in some type of, I don't know, ancient occultism. I was with this family, had been tasked and trying to teach me. And I specifically remember we were outside of this building one time, and there was an older woman outside, and she was smoking. And she was just like, "Don't you think you've taken enough time?" She's like, "It's time for you to sign the book." Like, I remember her saying that to me. I still can remember to this day the smell of the cigarette, and her saying, "Don't you think you've taken enough time with this? It's time for you to sign the book." And so when I was doing this hosting session, and like I said, astral travel, I actually work a lot with Misha Johnston. She's pretty well known in the community. She's an amazing hypnotherapist. We do a lot of work together. And this was a session I did with her trying to get information for disclosure. And um, I went under very deep. And I sometimes when I go deep under, I always pull myself sometimes into these like dark realms. And there was these three people that came walking up, and they all looked similar. I don't know if they were related or not, but they came and they had these books in their hands, and they asked me, they said, "Do you want to go to war with us?" And they said it seriously, like they said, "We're drawing a line. Do you want to go to war with us?" And they were not happy that I've given up what they had taught me. And I tried to explain to them that it wasn't something natural in me. It was something that was forced upon me. I never asked for any of this. I told them, I said, "I didn't ask for any of this. I never wanted this." And it to them, it didn't matter. They said, "You can't make a commitment and then turn your back on it." But they didn't want to listen to my explanation. And they're pretty much saying that they're going to harm me in some way. And I was getting kind of nervous, and I didn't, I'm in like these astral realms. I don't, I'm still new and learning, about this stuff. I'm not a professional. I don't consider myself a professional. So I'm still learning. And I got nervous, and they were starting to walk closer, and I looked up in the air, like in the sky, and there was this being kind of like, I don't know, almost like swimming in the clouds. And he immediately told me his name was Meru, Meru. And I didn't I was he came, and I was like, he told me He said, call the winds. And I'm like, I don't know how to call the winds. And he just kept saying, call the winds. And I did. I don't even know how I did it. Something, kind of just woke up in me, and I did call the winds, and they were kind of blown backwards. And I had no idea that was even something that, you can do with, the power of your mind and spirit, is push somebody else back. And he even taught me, it's almost like a magic spell to get rid of, dark things that you don't want around me. And he said, you say this phrase, it says, no darkness may enter here. This is a safe space for all. And when you say that, it almost like is throwing like a fireball at whatever is there, and you could push it back. Because I remember when I was a jinn, if somebody were to say, get away from me, I felt it. It felt like a punch in the stomach. So when we think about that, that's real. So if you do get nervous about something and you're a little afraid of the paranormal, you could say that. Say, get away from me. Say it with, you know, how do I use it?
Conviction.
Aggressive, assertive, make sure you believe in that, get away from me. I don't want you here. Because a lot of us, when we're, in a particular position as being like, a daemon or a jinn or whatever, we thrive on kind of the person allowing us to take over. It's a lot of it is consent. Isn't that strange that even, the daemons need consent, and then, a lot of these agencies are consent. It's like, does evil need consent? We don't know, because I can't even say what is evil or what is good. I don't even know anymore. I don't think I know, because I don't want to have that judgment of it, especially with my experiences. I can't really judge it that way anymore. It's changed for me.
And it's interesting you bring up consent again because Kids Like Hell was asking, how can they get your consent if they abducted you? Isn't that coercive control? Do you die if you say no?
Yes. Yes, you do. And you consent to being killed if you consent. Isn't that weird that you consent yourself to be killed? So on one of the forms, they have this statement, and I remote viewed this myself in the files. I actually broke when I was doing some remote viewing. I broke into a kind of like a secret office, and I looked at their files. And this statement is on their files. When you get ready to do retirement, it says, upon reaching this agreement, you will comply with all standards and executions necessary and written by the whole of the law. Any failure to comply with mission values will result in termination. And termination doesn't mean losing your job. It means a final termination. So
Right.
you literally sign to say, yes, kill me if I don't follow the rules. You sign that and you consent to it if you were in the programs. You don't have a choice. So I think that's really interesting too. There's so much, that's probably one of my favorite things to do, is to break into secret bases and get their information. That's like one of my favorite things to do. So there was a couple things we had talked about, because we're getting closer to, it's going quick. It always goes really quick. So
It does.
there was a couple of topics that we had that we wanted to get into, because I feel like these are some of the most important for, today. Is I wanted to talk first about the Olympia group. And so I had this experience. So I've been doing, I think it's been for about 4 years now, working on learning how to handle like my psionic abilities, like the remote viewing and everything. Um, so it was an experience. This is a real experience. This was not, I don't remember this being astral in any way. I just know I was taken, and I was taken to a base, and the base, it looked very dreary. And, there was a lot of people coming and going. The skies were always dark, but I don't even know if it felt like it was a natural dark. That's what was really weird. It was dark, almost like smog maybe, or something. Something was cutting like the light. So like heavy, heavy smog. So anyways, I'm on this base, and I know they said it's not, I can't know the base name yet. It's not ready to be known, they said. What I was taken there for is there was a general there. And I know this sounds crazy, but just hear me out. This is about 12 to 15 years in the future. So I was taken there, and I know for a fact, like for myself, in my own experience, if you can the way I can travel with my spirit and mind, you leave those limits behind. So did I find it like unbelievable that I could, meet this gentleman that's from the future? It didn't seem unbelievable, because it wasn't some weird thing that he had to say. He had very practical, realistic things to say. And he told me that he said about 15 years in the future, where he's at now, he's saying that there's a revolution on the horizon for all of us. He said it's getting really bad and they've built up there, and it's a very small revolution. But he's saying in our time, right now, there's a group called the Olympia group, and they're children right now. They're about like there's a couple of different age groups, but they say it's about 9 to 19. They're that age group right now. And all these kids, they fell to the earth together. He said they volunteered for this. And what these kids are, these are the computer kids, the hackers. And he said because in the future the wars are fought with technology. He said if we and these kids are integral to that revolution. They said if we don't have them, for the future revolution, we're going to lose everything, he said. He said, we're not going to have anything. And he said his message was really clear. He told me to come back and tell everybody to build the network, maintain the network, and protect the Olympia group. So it's basically a message of we're building our network here, protect these children and to make sure nothing happens to them, because if we don't have them, we're not going to have anything in the future to fight back with. These kids are so important and their minds are like computers naturally. So it was so interesting to hear this message, like, because it's not something like, I don't know, it was when I came back from that trip where they took me and brought me back, I was just like, I was kind of like in awe. I'm like, you know what am I supposed to do? You're asking me as just a girl, to come out here and like start this network for people, to get to know each other, for full disclosure and everything. I told him, like, I'm just a girl, and he said, go back and tell them what to do. So he I, I just try to tell people that we need to protect this group. And he told me that some of these kids that are identified as the Olympia group, the people in charge that are controlling us, they know who they are, and they are going to target them. They already know who they are. They're going to target them to make sure they're thrown off course. And they showed me a couple of pictures, and they try to show me who some of the kids were. There was a couple of kids that I saw, and one of them, they said they're going to try to make that girl a drug addict so she can't, focus on her mission and be able to complete it. So that's the Olympia group.
It's interesting because I've been talking with a couple others that are in the programs, and there seems to be a shift with some of the people who have kind of broken free somewhat of their programming,
Hmm.
and their number one mission that they are undertaking is going to help get the kids back
Hmm.
and to stop the kids from being messed with. And so it's interesting that you're saying you got this message to come back, and tell everyone to protect the kids. And it seems like there's a faction within the programs that are doing just that. So it's like,
Yeah. And you know what? He's very clear that, we're looking to other people to do this. It's no, he said, we're building, like me and you here. This is the network. It sounds crazy to say that, but he told me that this is the network we're building, and this is how we're going to get information out to people, especially with the Olympia group, because they're not just like um normal, not saying normal, but it's not a normal life for them. Their minds are going to be very coveted for what they can do and how they can handle technology and stuff. It's going to be amazing if we can turn. They said they are the ones that will turn the tides of the war when things are looking so bleak. And he told me that 15 is bleak, it's looking rough. And I did a session not that long ago, and I asked, like, I think it was a spirit guide of somebody, and we asked, what is the percentage that this reality, in terms of the revolution, and this timeline is going to happen, where it's looking really bleak. The spirit guide that came said 38% possibility that the timeline for that revolution, you know so looking rough. And so 38% is still kind of, to me, it's still, we should prepare. If it's 38%, it's still like something that needs preparation.
it's high, but And also, you
Yeah,
could
that's
look
what
at it
and we got a
as
chance, though, we
we're
got a
making a
chance.
difference.
Yeah, we got a chance. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, 'cause this is really important, and this is really hitting everybody, is, Project Oblivion. So I got this information, doing what I call, like, a hosting and, a remote viewing session. So I'm able to connect when I go into like a very deep trance, I'm able to connect to various parts of people. There's so many different, you don't even realize, you think I'm just, somebody can just connect to your brain or your mind. There's so many different pieces of a person to connect to. You connect to alters, different personality traits. You could connect the brain, the spirit, the mind, the soul. There's so many parts. So one thing I'm able to do is speak to some of these handlers in charge, and I specifically spoke to like some of the handlers that were um, monitoring like MK Ultra assets and moniker assets and things like that that take charge of us. And they said they're pretty much sick and tired of what we're doing, and they are going to squash us. Finally, they're going to squash the disclosure movement. That's their plan, and they're targeting people that are speaking out, people that are getting memories, and people that are assisting us, which would be podcasters. And that's going to be a huge target for them, is podcasters that are allowing some of experiencers to have a platform to talk about their experiences. So we're going to see a lot of people that are, especially in full disclosure, having their channels targeted, and the shows targeted. um, Assets are being targeted again. You're disappearing from your technology. I was just talking earlier, you get your phones hacked, all your information is taken off your computers. A lot of bad targeting. And Project Oblivion, they said it's given the green light. And what the green light means, so we were targeted before, but now they have to come full force, because they can't allow this to go any further, because now it's become too realistic. We're becoming more believable. We're making, better connections. It's expanding farther and farther, and more. And there's, more podcasters coming in, getting interested in these topics, and allowing people to speak on it and talk about their, personal experiences. And they said they can't have it. It's got to be over, and they're going to squash it, and they're going to keep targeting, and it's going to be, they're coming at us hard, is what they're trying to say. So people need to be aware about Project Oblivion, and people are really getting targeted from this. I really feel like they're doing exactly what they said they came to do, and it's to stop this, to exactly what we're doing right now. This network we're building, they want this stopped, and so they're going to target.
It kind of makes me wonder
Mhm.
because I've talked with a lot of guests, and there seems to be a common thread of you either are going to go on a show and have like a conversation like we are, where information's exchanged, or you'll go on and the whole purpose of the show is to mock you.
Yes.
And so I can't help wondering if those shows that are doing the mocking, so to speak,
Yes, they
if
said they
that's Project Oblivion.
they call out the actually the handler called them Oblivion agents. And he said, he told me, he's like, you guys are all, pretty much effing weak. Look at you. He's like, all we have to do is send one person and you all fall, like puppets without a string. He literally said that we fall so easy from just one person infiltrating our movement. It become one troll come in, and we all fall. And then a lot of us are fighting against each other. All it takes is one troll to come in and start that fight. And we don't even realize it, because we're still human. Besides that, we have our triggers and reactions and responses on top of, trauma. So they said they think it's comical that, they think we can, he's like, you guys think you can do anything about this? Look at you. Look at how disjointed you are. None of you, there's no unity, there's no nothing. He said Project Oblivion is, you're pretty much done. They think they can take out this whole movement. And it's like such a opposite from what the general from the future said. The future general, he's like, you guys are it. You have to build this up. Don't let it go. Don't let anybody stop you from maintaining the network. It's so important to maintain the network. So if we start arguing and fighting based on one Oblivion agent, it's over. It's pretty much, we're gonna like he said, we're gonna make your lives a living hell. You won't want to do this. That's what they're going to say. We're going to make it so bad that you won't even want to continue doing these shows. hosts or, people. Yes, that's what they plan on doing. That's Project
Right.
Oblivion.
And I know we're getting close to the hour, and
Yes.
so I just want to ask one question of you.
Yes.
And I don't know if you're familiar with people like Michael Sala, Dr.
Yeah, I know who they
Michael.
are. Yeah, I know who they are.
He is talking about like the Jedi generals and admirals are returning. Do you think this is like the general from your future that, they're sending back forces to help us?
No. He said that we are it. They have no resources to do that. He said it's bleak. That's what this general told me. It's not like there's some big, troop coming and giving us the power. No, it's us. Isn't that, we're tasked with this. And that's why I told him, I was like, what can I do? What can I do? Like, I'm nobody. And he's like, go back and tell everybody. And that's the same thing, the same message. My father, he passed away a long time ago, and I maintain a connection with them through my abilities, but same message my own father brought me from the spirit world. He said burn it down. He said burn the system down. He said go out there, tell everybody what they did and what they made us do. And that's the mission. He told me, you tell everybody what they made us do, and for people to know is what's going to cause change, what's going to create change, what's going to keep our movement going forward, and not to let oblivion destroy us from the inside out.
Well, I can tell you on behalf of my show, as long as I have a platform that I can air on, I'm doing it. So,
And
um,
hopefully maybe someday one of those the kids, the Olympia group, will see this on like a YouTube or something, and something will click in them. And that's what the general thinks too. You know, he knows we have limited resources. He knows that. We told him that directly. We don't have like the monetary resources to build up some huge. He's like, you don't need that. He said, you need heart, you need soul to continue this movement. That's what you put into it.
it's interesting you say that because before when I started the show and people would ask me, why do you do it? I go, oh, to, learn and build
Mhm.
community, and all that.
There's a real
But
mission behind this.
lately, when people ask me, they're like, why do you do this? I'm like, to plant a seed. And whether it grows or not is up to the individual. But I'm putting my shows out there to be seeds that are to be planted.
Yeah, and I can feel like when I start talking about the Olympia, I could feel like that chill, like, that chill of knowing, that psychic chill that you get when you're like, holy smokes, I got to tell people about this. And when I got the message, I didn't say anything for like some months because I didn't, it sounds crazy. A general from the future gave me a message saying, we need to do this and protect these children, this particular group of children. There's quite a lot of them, and they're all over the
Mhm.
world. But and that's what he thinks. The general thought, like, he knows we have limited resources, but he thinks that with these shows and things that, because kids are so much on the computers and YouTube and all that, he thinks they may come across it, and something inside them will click and maybe trigger, who knows.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's validation or not, but my left ear, this ear,
Hmm.
always will have a mark behind it whenever I go and do mission work.
Hmm.
And so I kind of rub on it and it's just annoys me, but it's there. But while you were talking about Olympia and all of that and helping with the kids, I started getting a tingle
Hmm.
in right in that area, and I was like, I don't ever get tingles there. So I was like, that's interesting that as you're talking, it feels like something might have activated or something.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. Like whenever I talk about it, I get that important feeling. And I don't think it's outrageous what the message is. For being how I obtain the information, it's just, how can it be a crazy thing to say protect children, and create unity within your own movement? I don't, how can people say, oh, she's a liar? Why is that such a crazy message? It seems pretty natural to say something like that to me.
It does, and then you look at the world today and it's like so many things that we think should be common sense and
Yeah.
don't need to be addressed, we're having to address.
Yeah.
So I would say your mission statement is fitting perfectly in with the times we're in.
Yes. Protect the children. Maintain the network, build the network, maintain the network, protect the Olympia group.
Yes, well, we're actually gone a little bit over the hour,
Okay.
and so we will definitely have to have you back on again
Okay.
and keep
Yeah.
going with this.
Yeah. I have a lot of information and stories I got, basically doing hosting like paranormal things. If any group members or, viewers want to ever, talk about some of that paranormal stuff that I find really interesting. I'd love to be back on and we could talk more about the paranormal parts that I get into.
Actually, I have a paranormal podcast, so I might just have you switch over and have you on that one to talk about the
Yeah,
paranormal.
it would be really cool.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your
Yeah, thank you
time
for
and
having me back. I hope everybody enjoys it. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me on social media. Anybody that has a question about anything or any of the information or my books or blogs, anything, if they have any questions, just reach out to me on social media.
all right, and to the chat room, I'm sorry we again couldn't get to all the questions. We do have a finite time, and so we'll just,
Hold
keep
on to
bringing
them.
them.
Maybe, yeah, hang on to the questions. We can get to them next time, maybe.
Yeah, we might just have you come on for a question and answer session.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah.
All right. Well, have yourself a wonderful night and week. Or actually, I could even say weekend because it is
Yep.
the middle of
It's
the
close.
week.
Yep, it's close.
So, thank you to everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you on the next episode. Blessings to you all. And I know this doesn't need to be said again, but let us look out for each other and especially look out for the next generation coming and all the kids. And let's make that 38% be more like a negative 38%.
Yes.
So with that, blessings to you all, and we are going to sign out. So good night, everyone.